Bollywood, welcome to a brand new episode of Battle Cry. I'm Shiv Arur. With me is my brother in arms, Gaurav Sawant. This is the only show that gets you up close with weapons, warriors, and how India fights. As Gaurav and I have been bringing you all of the last fortnight, the world is united against a common enemy, coronavirus. The Indian Armed Forces themselves are involved in the fight against COVID-19. But remember, they don't have the luxury of focusing just on the disease. They've got their everyday work against India's adversaries as well. And that's why on this episode of Battle Cry, we're focusing on attack helicopters. It's become a crucial element in India's fight. Welcome to hell. Helicopters, that is. Descending from the skies to unleash, well, hell. And India is beefing up big time. With the world's most feared attack helicopter in Indian colors, the armed forces are all set to bet big on fully Indian machines next. On Battle Cry this week, we strap into India's next big hellbird. Now, since Battle Cry is a show where we seriously get you up close like no other show, we're starting this week's episode with my flight in India's very own light combat helicopter. Now, you've heard about the Apaches, you've heard about the Mi-35s, foreign attack helicopters in Indian service. But the light combat helicopter is a fully Indian combat helicopter, the first that India has purpose-built for the mission. And I became the first Indian journalist to strap into the LCH. The world's most feared attack helicopter. The American-built Apache now flies with Indian colors. But waiting in the wings is a combat helicopter that is Indian in the true sense of the word. Say namaste to the light combat helicopter. It doesn't have a formal name yet, but it's already fit and ready for the fight. Developed and test flown for nearly a decade by Hindustan Aeronautics Ltd, the light combat helicopter is not just made in India, but custom built for India's unique battlefield conditions, from the deserts of Rajasthan to the super high altitudes of Ladakh. But what better way to get acquainted with the light combat helicopter than by taking a spin in one? I was invited by HAL's test team to strap into this helicopter and get a never-before taste of what this Swadeshi combat chopper is truly all about. India today has been invited to be the first journalist team to fly in and experience the light combat helicopter developed and tested by Hindustan Aeronautics Ltd. This is India's first attack helicopters. It has missiles, it has rockets, it has guns, and we happen to be the first ever media crew who's going to get a taste of the light combat helicopter. For a flight in the LCH, I have to get into the full pilot kit, from overalls to flying boots. Joined by HAL test pilot Wing Commander Subhash John, we walk out onto the airfield to the waiting helicopter, soaking in the unforgiving Bengaluru sun. And it is here that I receive a crucial part of the flying experience I'm about to have. A combat flying helmet equipped with a helmet-mounted sight. An electro-optical system used by pilots to point various weapons at their targets. But more on that in just a bit. First, the inside of the light combat helicopter itself. Constructed with a sleek tandem cockpit rather than the usual side-by-side seats on other helicopter types, the LCH from the outside sports a stealthy front profile that also gives adversaries a smaller, harder target to latch onto. Wing Commander Subhash and I belt up, and then the engines come on. The rumble of the twin Shakti turboshaft engines come to life, rapidly turning the rotors into a steady chop. The helicopter is now ready to taxi out. With all checks done and cleared by air traffic control, the LCH gently lifts off. In airspace over Bengaluru, the light combat helicopter is put through a series of maneuvers, demonstrating its agility in the air and carefully customized flying qualities. The effortless handling that Wing Commander Subhash demonstrates at low altitude validates the years of tough flight testing that has gone into refining the LCH into the flying machine it is today. Returning to the tarmac after a 25-minute flight, I've just had the most personal possible tryst with an aircraft that stands on the threshold of Indian military service. This year, the LCH is all set to open its order book with at least 15 to be ordered right away and a total requirement of nearly 200 helicopters for the Indian Air Force and Army. India's own warcopter is fully ready. An absolutely incredible experience, flying in the light combat helicopter. And the best part, Gaurav, is that the light combat helicopter is actually fully ready for operations. They're literally just waiting for orders now.
Now, Shiv, flying an attack helicopter that's actually been custom built for the Indian Armed Forces to be able to fly in the high altitude battlefield of Siachen and to be able to fly in the desert sector. How long before this becomes a part of the Indian Army's inventory?
You know, the best part about the light combat helicopter actually is that it's ready right now. 9 of the aircraft have already been built. There are at least 3 or 4 that are conducting various kinds of testing. There is an effort, even as we speak, to reduce the weight of the light combat helicopter so it can perform its role even better. The even better news, Gaurav, is that apart from an order for 15 LCHs that is expected sometime this year, the overall requirement of this particular helicopter could be as much as 200 helicopters, which is a very, very healthy number for an Indian product. And then it could be improved into an even more lethal kind of platform. So very, very optimistic about its future.
So the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force both looking for attack helicopters. The Apaches are just an interim as of now. 200. We can't afford 200 Apaches.
Yes.
This helicopter, the LCH, it requires an anti-tank guided missile. I mean, the aim of an attack helicopter is to protect your armor advance and take down the enemy armor. How soon before it's fully weaponized for war?
That's a very good question, because, you know, the crucial weapons on the light combat helicopter is actually an area of concern, because the platform, the integration of the platform is done. It has been proven to be an extremely high-performing helicopter, meeting all its requirements, meeting all its flying quality requirements. But the crucial weapons like its anti-tank guided missile, the air-to-air missile, which has already been selected, it has been tried on it as well. The purchases haven't happened. So there's a measure of frustration in terms of the red tape, Gaurav. But I think with an order for the helicopter expected not very long from now, we're hoping that the weaponry trials, the weaponry fitments will actually happen. Because as Gaurav rightly pointed out, the weapons are going to be most important. It's an attack helicopter. It's not just a utility vehicle that's going to be flying. It needs its weaponry, and hopefully that will happen as well. But the light combat helicopter, when it does, join service maybe next year or the year after next, joins a legacy of attack helicopters already in Indian service, which is a mix of both Indian helicopters that have been kitted out with guns and missiles, as well as imported helicopters from Russia and the United States. Take a look. When you think of an attack helicopter in the Indian context, chances are you're thinking of this beast. The Soviet origin Mi-35, a heavy, brutal helicopter that has served with the Indian Air Force for decades, is in the autumn of its operational life and will be phased out in the years ahead to make way for newer, more capable machines. More recently, HAL's proven Dhruv helicopter was modified and weaponized to spawn this one, the Rudra, giving it missiles, rockets and a gun for the combat support role. These helicopters are now in service in significant numbers, with more in the pipeline. The latest combat helicopter to fly in Indian colours is of course the American Apache, seen here at its induction ceremony in Pathankot. 22 of these formidable and advanced combat helicopters will enter service by next year. So these are highly recognizable products that are already in Indian service. The Apache is the newest entrant. The Mi-35 is a legendary Soviet heavy attack helicopter that's been in Indian service for many, many years together. In fact, Gaurav, to bring you in, you've actually seen the Mi-35 and some of these other attack helicopters in action. I know there was an application of some of these helicopters in Kargil. You've seen them during deployments in Africa as well. Tell us about what it was like seeing these beasts in action.
So as you very rightly pointed out, the Soviet helicopters, massive helicopters, the Mi-35. Now, when these helicopters take off with their rotors, the sound itself is really scary for the adversary. Of course, in Sierra Leone, where I saw these helicopters in action, they were taking on armed rebels of the RUF. And that's when these helicopters, they come in fast, they swoop down, and then their guns, 35mm, if I remember correctly, the 35mm guns, they just go off and boom, boom, boom. Their rate of fire is so fast that the enemy just doesn't know what to do. Whether it's their tanks or armored personal carriers or jeeps, the anti-aircraft jeeps can also be taken down and very quickly. So it's a very potent system, now dated, also given the
Which is where the Apaches come in.
Which is where the Apaches come in, Shiv.
It's incredible. The Apache is a hugely modern helicopter. You'll find videos everywhere on the internet of the way the longbow system is used to target insurgents and terrorists, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, elsewhere. The beauty of this mix of helicopters is India has experience operating them, but now it wants to move to the next level and try and indigenize as much as possible. So whether it is the Apache, whether it is the Mi-35, whether it is the HAL Rudra, which is basically the Dhruv helicopter, weaponized and upgraded with more, offensive capabilities, the light combat helicopter that Gaurav and I were discussing just now and that I flew is the first helicopter in India that has actually been built from the ground up, not just as an attack helicopter, Gaurav. An attack helicopter is fine, but purpose-built to also operate with meaningful weapon loads at high altitudes like in Siachen and Ladakh. Here's a look at what the light combat helicopter can do for India. It's true, the light combat helicopter can do what no other combat helicopter can. It can operate from India's high-altitude border battlefields in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh while still carrying meaningful weapon loads.
सबसे बढ़िया स्पेशलिटी है कि ये हमारे देश के लिए बना है। जैसे हमारे देश में बहुत अलग-अलग किस्म के टेरेन्स हैं, ऑल्टीट्यूड्स पे हिमालय की, ये आराम से ऑपरेट कर सकता है और हमारे ट्रूप्स को सपोर्ट कर सकता है। और दूसरे लोगों के पास ऐसा कोई हथियार नहीं है जो इसके अगेंस्ट फील्ड कर सकते हैं।
This has to be seen against the backdrop of the Kargil war. That was way back then when we had attack helicopters. They couldn't come up to those altitudes because of performance limitations. That is when the Air Force wanted a weapon system with capability to reach those altitudes.
Sitting on the tarmac here in Bengaluru, this is one of 4 light combat helicopters so far built. With an order for 15 just around the corner, the overall requirement will be much larger. A luxury made possible by the helicopter's low price tag. It was designed ground up to be affordable and therefore purchasable in large numbers.
हम कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सिग्नेचर की वेट कर रहे हैं। जैसे ही कॉन्ट्रैक्ट साइन होगा, पहले 15 जहां तो दे देंगे और उसमें से 9 तो हम स्ट्रक्चर वगैरह सब बना चुके हैं HAL के ओन पैसों से, और उसको इक्विपिंग की ज़रूरत है। वो 5-6 महीने में आराम से हो जाएगा और हम जहाज कॉन्ट्रैक्ट रिक्वायरमेंट से पहले ही उन यूजर्स को दे सकते हैं।
The light combat helicopter is built to seek and destroy. And when it comes to that, this helicopter is formidably armed. With 70mm rocket pods, Mistral air-to-air missiles from France, a 20mm chin-mounted cannon, and the capability to deploy an anti-tank missile like the Indian Helena or German Pars-3.
The weapons are giving us good standoff capability. You're looking at rockets, air-to-ground rockets, which have been integrated with also a growth potential in terms of laser-pointed rockets and air-to-ground missiles. You have the gun, a very accurate 20mm gun, which is slave to the pilot sight.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Make in India defence program hasn't really taken off in the large-scale way that it perhaps was anticipated to. But helicopter programs like the light combat helicopter are proof that making in India has to be the way of the future. We're now going to show you the other helicopter programs by Hindustan Aeronautics Ltd. All of these developed and tested here in India. The LCH is a true blue made in India combat helicopter, the lightest in the world, and when produced at full rate, it will be among the most cost-effective. While Pakistan has ordered the Turkish-built T-129 attack and China builds the Z-10, the LCH will evolve into a far more reliable machine once in operational service, mostly because the demands that will be made on it. The light combat helicopter is so far along on its journey, HAL says it is ready to supply airframes almost immediately once orders are placed. All that remains now is for the government to open its doors to the first combat helicopter specifically built for India. Helicopter after helicopter has had trials in India, but when they see the kind of peculiarities of the Indian Armed Forces requirements, especially at high altitude locations like Siachen, the Northeast, Tawang, etc., they really meet their Achilles heel. Gaurav, no matter where the helicopter comes from, it is operating in these frontier areas in the north, Ladakh, Siachen, Daulat Beg, Uldi, where many of these helicopters actually meet their match. And that's one of the reasons why, when the Indian Air Force decided to put their money into an indigenous effort, yes, one of their primary requirements was, I want to be able to operate this helicopter with enough weapons at high altitude. Why is that important, Gaurav?
Shiv, nowhere in the world does any Air Force fly or any army fly in such diverse terrain.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the world do they have a battlefield like Siachen where helicopters have to fly at posts up to 21,000 feet altitude. So this is what makes India unique. So you have flying that happens in the desert, 0 degrees, then you have flying in mountainous terrain, and then you have high altitude terrain of Kargil, and then the extreme high altitude terrain.
Yes.
So peculiar weather conditions. So an aircraft or a helicopter has to be built for India.
Exactly.
Well, the Russians did it with an aircraft. They built an AN-32 for Siachen operations. That's a medium lift transport aircraft.
Yes.
Now a helicopter has been built by India for Indian terrain, and this is what makes the light combat helicopter unique. Once the weaponization is complete, will it still be able to fly in those altitudes? Remember, flying there is very difficult. You can barely take 50 kgs weight in some of those places if you're flying a cheetah.
Like Gaurav said, the peculiarities of the kind of torture testing that is required of these helicopters. Just imagine this, from the brutal heat of the desert, Gaurav, Jaisalmer and other places where these helicopters are tested, and then they're taken to places like Ladakh in the winter for the cold or extreme cold weather testing, and the helicopters still have to perform in pretty much the reasonably same manner. Able to fire weapons, able to target, able to carry enough loads to actually, bring enough weaponry to a fight. So the expectations from the light combat helicopter are actually really, really big. But this is the present. The immediate future is the light combat helicopter, which the Indian Air Force, mind you, is really looking forward to. And I've spoken to pilots in the Indian Air Force who say they love it if they've flown it and they're looking forward to it. But there is also a future. And obviously, who else but the Americans who've put their money on what lies ahead maybe 10 to 15 years from now. You've seen the Apaches, you've seen the Mi-35s, you've even seen the LCH. But the Americans are already looking at the shape of what an attack helicopter is going to look like maybe 15 years from now. This is a real mix. From the world's most modern attack helicopter to a fully Indian attack helicopter. From a formidable Soviet-era attack helicopter to a utility helicopter kitted out for combat. This is India's present. But elsewhere in the world, the future of attack helicopters is already being scripted. The US Army is speeding towards choosing from among 5 futuristic concepts that will be the world's next big attack helicopter. In weeks from now, the US Army will eliminate 3 contenders from the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft contest and fund the development of 2 helicopter prototypes built by the world's most experienced helicopter companies. The concept art has already taken the aviation world by storm. The first to unveil itself, the Bell Invictus. Then comes the Raider X, built by Sikorsky, the company founded by helicopter pioneer Igor Sikorsky and the same firm that will soon supply MH-60 Romeo helicopters to the Indian Navy. And finally, Boeing's yet unnamed contender in the competition. Boeing, builder of the legendary Apache that's already in Indian Air Force service, will be pushing its experience in the field of armed helicopters to be a front-runner in the race. 3 futuristic helicopters, 3 firms with massive experience and their own major strengths. As this crucial tournament races towards a decision, the Indian Air Force and the Indian Army will be watching from a distance. And those are just concept animations. Those aren't even real. So you can imagine when it finally becomes real, what these futuristic helicopters are going to look like. Hopefully, Gaurav, by, in the next 15 years, India will not have to import anything. Hopefully, we will have our own helicopters like the LCH, fully modernized like the ones that the Americans are building, or at least, reasonably comparable. But isn't this fascinating? I mean, there's a video game-like quality to warfare. I don't want to belittle combat, but technology and its infusion into the battlefield is truly quite fascinating.
So in the wars to come, the country with a better technology will win the war with least amount of damage to own self and property.
Digital battlefield.
Digital battlefield. That's the aim. So can you take down the enemy's communication system? Can you take down the enemy's radar system? Can you take down the enemy without even crossing the line of control? That's the future of warfare, and not just using your aircraft, but also using your helicopters, or maybe just sitting in an underground bunker. A lot of that is what is being war gamed just now, Shiv.
It's true, because India is currently building the light combat helicopter. It's also building rotorcraft drones that might operate along with these helicopters. And these animated videos from the future, paint an amazing picture of where military aviation is actually going. Whether it becomes a reality, even in the Indian context, that remains to be seen. Gaurav and I bid you farewell only for the moment on this latest episode of Battle Cry. Thank you so much for watching. As we say goodbye, remember, as we always say, India will only have realized its true strength if it never needs to fire a weapon and never needs to send a human into battle. See you again soon.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.